Hey guys, welcome back to Community Starcraft 2. I'm your host Magnet, as it says right there on screen, just in case you forgot. And I'm going to show you about some PvT scouting information today. And we'll go through all this little things you need to know, all the different little reads and timings you need to make in this matchup in order to play a safe, long macro game without dying to anything really silly. So let's just go ahead and jump into the game if you don't mind, which you have no objection to because you can't stop me. And the player we're looking at today is Stardust, and he's playing against Happy. And like I like to do on most of these, let's just start out with being in the dark. So all we can see is what Stardust sees to kind of simulate what it's like to play from his perspective and see the decisions that he makes based upon what he sees. Now, first of all, I should mention that 90% of pro players will just run a one gateway expand build in this matchup, so that's what we're going to see for basically every PvT thing that we talk about for the next little while, because there's nothing else that's that strong or common. So basically all he's doing is just grabbing one gas, getting the gateway, a cybernetics core, and then the play here is to start a zealot as soon as you have about 200 minerals, which I don't think he's doing. Yeah, finally he does it. And then what you do is you keep the zealot in queue, you bring the probe down, and if this SCV starts an engineering bay to block you, and you keep the zealot, otherwise you just cancel it and start the nexus. So that's what we're going to see in most of these builds. I just want to explain what the reasoning is for it. And the other reasoning is that he doesn't scout with it because there's not a whole lot that's going to matter as far as scouting this early into the game. I mean, you might hit some crazy stuff, so I should mention that really quickly. I would actually have gone out and scouted after core if it were me, but I guess it's not all that essential. I guess he's just assuming that there's a command center on the way. That's really the only thing you need to verify, is that there's a command center. If there's something more aggressive, then you do need to react a little differently. But the fast mothership core kind of gives you that photon overcharge buffer to hold off a lot of stuff that you wouldn't have been able to back in Wings of Liberty, for example. So, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you can play this fairly blind, but still you will want to get out there and at least make sure that they're expanding, which we know that he is because we can see on the production tab, but Stardust really doesn't. But at the same time, he doesn't really care that much, because if he gets hit by a big attack, you can always sack this Nexus if he like pulls SCVs or something crazy like that, but it's just so rare nowadays. He's going to finally get out and scout with his Stalker to figure out what's going on. But even still, he's just kind of looking around for proxies and stuff a little bit. I guess I shouldn't have shown this replay as willy-nilly as I do, but I guess I wanted to demonstrate that you can play this matchup without scouting too much. What I would like to see from the Stalker, at least, is get out on the map and see if there's any proxy factories and whatnot. That's not very normal for pro-level players to do, but you will see that every once in a while in your own games. Like, for example, they'll build a factory here, and then they'll float it into your base and just drop it down here and build mines or something. So I guess another thing you should be looking out for, or at least should be doing, is try to spread your pylons out a little bit so you can spot stuff like that before it grows into too big of a problem. Like this pylon back here is totally unnecessary. I'd like to see this pylon probably here, this pylon probably here, and this pylon probably somewhere like right there. It would be given really a lot better scouting information as far as seeing any sort of weird proxies or stuff like that well before they're a problem. But he's just assuming that there is nothing too crazy coming in for him. And again, this is really just pro levels players being very studious and knowing what their opponent likes to do and realizing that it's kind of fallen out of the metagame being aggressive on one base right now anyway. So that's kind of the motivation behind this. The Observer is very important out of the Robo. Any build, especially right after Nexus, you're going to want to grab a Robo and get an Observer as soon as possible, because then that'll hold off any weird like Banshee or Mine stuff. It'll most importantly get you information, and a lot of people like to really go nuts with these Observers. Like even some people even make like 4 or 5, so they can have total map vision and be able to know where everything is coming from at all times. And that's probably the biggest thing about scouting in PvT. Especially since the Terran's options are fairly limited as far as everyone will go bio, at least everyone who's anyone will go bio. Sometimes, very, very rarely, you'll see mech, which we'll talk about in a later video, but we just have to assume bio, and the Observer will confirm that fairly soon. But the game is really up to you. It's fairly rare that you need to scout out and figure out what a Terran is doing and directly react to it. It's most of the time you need to make sure they're not doing anything too greedy, like taking a third base right now, or like putting down, you know, 2 engineering bays and a 3rd command center and being super greedy that way. Those are just things you need to verify eventually. Now this Stalker does just verify that he has expanded. Didn't see any weird mech units or anything like that, so all he knows right now is where he spawned, and then you can just fly the observer in and get whatever information you want. So I know this seems a little bit, a little silly, but honestly it is really hard to find replays in PvT where the Protoss player scouts overly diligently. Okay, so let's explain this timing. This 8-minute timing roughly, or at least as fast as you can get your observer over there, the things you're going to want to look out for are the barracks count and whether there's a factory on the way or if it's already done. Now if it's already done and you get your observer there, then you need to probably produce an extra one, and you can maybe put cannons in your mineral line. This is going to mean either a really fast drop or really fast mines or Hellions or something like that. So that's the first bit of information you're going to look out for. And the second bit is, if the factory isn't quite done yet, then that's going to mean just a really standard medevac timing. But you do want to keep an observer hanging around just to see if they add on extra barracks or they go 3rd command center first. So either they're going to go up to 5 barracks with their starport producing medevacs, or they're going to stay on 3 barracks and produce a command center first, and that'll tell you how aggressive they want to be in the mid game. So you can kind of customize your 3rd base timing around what they're doing. And that's probably the biggest scouting read right now in this matchup. Otherwise, you can just keep your observer sitting here and just watch his army, and whenever it moves out, you can have a second observer somewhere to buffer to know where his army is and what's going on. So you have plenty of time to react, you know exactly where everything is coming from. And that's going to be a big thing throughout the rest of the game. So you can continue to scout with this observer if you want to. You can even just sit it right out here and then just kind of put it on a little bit of a pattern to walk in here and then come back out if you need to. So there's a lot of different ways you can get information. And secondarily, if you don't really know, you can always just hallucinate something and fly it in. So there's so many scouting tools available for you in a matchup where you don't actually need to scout terribly diligently. So one other thing that you can adjust to is you need to see how the Terran is responding to your tech. So right now, Stardust has really fast Colossus. So he's going to have a second Colossus out at about 10:25 roughly. That's really, really fast for 2 Colossus. And if you flew back in here, you might have noticed that there is another starport building, and this starport's going to mean that he's heavily reacting to the Colossus transition. So if Stardust really wanted to be cute, he could actually cancel this Colossus and get right into Storm super fast, so that Happy hopefully just dumps a lot of money into Vikings that are not going to do anything. So that's another little scouting read and play that you can make if you see this going on. The converse would be if you're going for Storm and they had a really fast Ghost Academy, you could just switch into Colossus right away and make their Ghost worthless. So that's another little play that you can have. But otherwise, it's really just kind of positioning observers around the map and figuring out what's going on. He did lose an observer, so you want to go ahead and reproduce one if you can, which I think he does. But as far as the rest of the game, he did go for Blink first, which is really common. It's actually one of the safest plays you can do. And then this is going to be useful because if you can spot medevacs coming in before they have actually done any damage and just blink on top of them, then the observer and your blink combination is going to get you a lot of free stuff that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get. Which we do see a little bit later in the game. He actually positions an observer right here, and Happy goes for a big drop, and he snipes both the medevacs. It basically just ends the game. But that should hopefully give you a quick rundown on this matchup, and I do have a second replay that we should look at here pretty quickly, just to kind of gloss over, and you'll see some different stuff from a different player. This is going to be Crank that we're going to be looking at versus, his name is Windy, but this account name is Windy anyway, but this actual player is Major. He's a Mexican Terran. He's actually really, really good. So we'll just watch the perspective here from Crank. He's going to do something a little bit differently. He will just do a 1-gate expand, but he is going to do it eventually on 2 gas. And we'll explain the reasoning why behind that. So we're going to see him take a gas here. Second gas is now on the way, which we can see coming up. And this is, again, fairly unusual. But the core coming down now, he's still going to use the same expansion timing. So he does have a Zealot on the way right now. And this is going to be the same thing. If you get down here and they have started an engineering bay to block you, just keep the Zealot. Otherwise, if they don't start an engineering bay and they're not blocking you, just cancel the Zealot and build your Nexus faster. So yeah, there's a reasoning that everyone does stuff like that. It's just to get a quick nexus that's fairly safe. And what Crank is going to do is he's actually going to send a probe out to build another pylon out here on the map, and he's going to build a Stargate here, which is going to be a combination for harassment and for scouting information. So we'll show that as it comes up, but still, for right now, the Mothership Core is out in time to push out the Reapers, so I guess I should mention that. The next play right after your Nexus in this type of build is to get a Mothership Core and Chrono Boost it so that you can hold off any Reaper harassment. It can be a little bit hard to do, so you can produce a Stalker as well if you need it. But still, if you control properly, it should be fine. So, right now, Crank is just trying to figure out where Major spawned. And he's only checking the natural right now because, he's just figuring that there's nothing that they can do on one base that's going to be too harmful, especially with the Oracle, because if they just go on one base and they just attack and don't have anything back at home, the Oracle kills all their SCVs, you just overcharge, maybe force field your ramp, and you win. So there's just not a lot of big one-base things that are very powerful anymore in this matchup from a Terran perspective. So the Stargate's done, he's going to produce an Oracle. And the Oracle has a lot of utility, most importantly to try and harass and kill SCVs, but it still does get a fair bit of information. So Major has the one Reaper out, sending his Marines across the map now, and that's fairly scary, but we know what's going on in the main base, and that is that he's producing mines. And the mines are a really good answer to the Oracle, and that's going to be a big problem for Crank if he just flies his Oracles into that, but at least he'll know that the threat of mines and maybe Hellions and stuff like that is on the map. So he can react differently based upon what he sees. So the unfortunate thing is he doesn't get there in time to see the first pair of Hellions, and those Hellions can actually be really annoying. So he flies in here, and I'm going to put us on just Crank's vision from now on so we can kind of get a little bit more of an authentic experience. So one thing that he does is he definitely skirts all the way around, and honestly with this build I would actually just skirt straight through, because the difference is that they maybe see your Oracle a second faster, and that's not, I mean, just having information as far as on the factory is worth it. So he doesn't know this quite right away. He's going to be caught by surprise just a little bit, but this is why you get the faster Mothership Core, to be sure you can push away any sort of attacks that'll happen while you're not there. So just going to be killing SCVs. More importantly, the Oracle does see extra barracks coming up, so he knows this isn't going to be anything like mech. He can affirm that it is bio earlier rather than later. And he does see the factory now. So this is what I was talking about, where if maybe this was an observer or something a little bit later, if you saw a factory this early, this is like, oh no, this is most definitely some sort of mine play, so I need to be looking out for like mine drops. In this case, there's going to be a Hellion run by that he didn't know about for quite a while, but his spacing is good on his Stalkers. He can't overcharge his natural, so there's not a lot these Hellions should be able to do. So the Oracle's still being in here, or rather being annoying in here and getting in here. He needs to be careful and not lose the Mothership Core. Yeah. So yeah, everything being just totally fine here for Crank. You can see one other thing that he did do very wisely is he did just wall off this section right here so that Hellions can't be as much of a problem. So you want to think about your building positioning in that as well, but even still, you still do want a pylon somewhere over here to try and spot for proxies or drops or stuff like that that for some reason both these players aren't doing, but it actually is fairly common in this matchup. So one thing I want to point out is the fact that Crank sees this so early. He should see these little mines as well. You don't want to lose this Oracle to mines if you can help it, and he's going to, so that's unfortunate. But the one thing that he's going to do in this game that's a little different than before, the previous player that we saw, which was, well, I can't remember now, Stardust, was he just made a robo and just kind of sat back and waited. Crank's going to do this differently. He's going to be a little more active. He's going to produce a cannon or two just to protect against future mine drops. But he's going to be a lot more aggressive and kind of scout through harassment and kind of abuse the timings that come up here. So the Oracle coming back in here, going to try and delay these barracks even further. But like we saw last game, and what you're going to see in most games, is the first timing from the Terran is going to center around their medevacs. And what that's going to do is they're going to be fairly predictable as far as when they move out on the map, and you can abuse that by attacking them or harassing them when they're out on the map to try and force them to stay home or punish them if they come to attack you. This is what we're going to see out of Crank, and it's a very unusual style, but it is very indirect scouting only by knowing the normal timings. Jeez, I hate switching on someone's vision and just seeing their selections flash all over the place. But again, if you're ever wondering what's going on, you can just produce sentries and get them out here, and Crank actually forgot Warp Gate, LOL. But you can produce sentries and just hallucinate something if you really need to see what's going on. But the timing that usually medevacs start coming out and being aggressive is about 10 minutes. But it's going to be a little later this game because of the harassment that Crank was able to do and the fact that Major isn't running a typical opener. So his response is going to be, alright, well, you're not going to be in your base, so I'll just put DTs there while you're gone. And that'll punish you for being out of your base when I can easily harass you. And you'll also note that the Oracles have scouted that there's no turrets anywhere and that Major is using mines rather than turrets to defend against the Oracles. So the Oracles are doing several things on top of making sure what the build is and harassing. They're trying to see what the response is, and if there's no turrets here and Major's being lazy and just using mines instead, then guess what? The DTs are going to be really strong on the follow-up, and that's the whole reasoning behind this opener so far. So we'll see that come to fruition here in just a second, and from that point on, I mean, you know what the Terran's going to do. You know you need to get into Storm and Colossus, so there's not a whole lot of new reads and reactions you need to make. Other than perhaps, like we were talking about the last game, now he sees the third command center timing, so he knows that he can harass this if he wants to, if Major's out on the map. But he'll notice that if he sees ghosts or something in response to his Storm or his Zealot Archon force that he's going to have going on just a little bit, then he can switch into Colossus really fast and kind of abuse him for using that tech to counter the Storm. So let's just kind of fast forward here and see the point where we're talking about. You can see the Phoenix coming in here is also a key part of this, because the Phoenix flew in here, didn't see any turrets in the main, or rather at the natural, didn't see any in the mineral line, so he knows that the DTs should do a fair amount of work. You can just split them up and make him burn scans in order to deal with this. And at home, you should have enough units and enough tech to hold off any pushes that he comes in with. So Crank is in such a good position, all because of his scouting and his ability to make reads here. And I just want to show you guys the amount of damage that can be done if they don't have the right reactions to this so far. So there's a DT here in the main, there's a DT here in the natural. The command center out here is going to get canceled because he has absolutely nothing. Look how far out of position Major's army is, and if Storm is done in time, which he can chrono boost and get that done on time before this attack gets here, then he should be absolutely and totally fine. So this is just something I wanted to show you guys, how you can scout through aggression and scout through harassment and do really well in that way. You can even see that throughout the game he's killed 25 SCVs, and that is beyond significant. So pretty cool game here out of Crank. I wanted to show you guys that for the scouting information. Normally I would have shown you guys just for the build that he did, because that was a really cool idea that he had throughout the game. But either way, I hope that this explained kind of the mindset that you want to have going into PvT, and show you guys a little bit of the tricks and reads that you need to make in order to react properly. So I'll be making more videos in the future. The next one's going to be scouting and PvP, which I know is a really hard matchup to scout and kind of garner any information from. But we'll figure it out, and look out for that video in the near future, and I'll see you guys then.